Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, is the world's youngest nation headed for civil war? Fresh violence continues despite peace talks and the humanitarian crisis is getting worse. So what's next for South Sudan? You know, whenever we do a show that is in the news headlines that we're covering on Al Jazeera, we always ask ourselves one specific question, is how are we going to do it differently on the stream? That is a question that digital producer Malika Bilal asked at an editorial meeting. Everybody was like, ha! What's the answer, Malika?
Well, of course, we found the answer. Now, you know, as we all do, that we like to make our stream community happy. And so this is a story that we've got multiple requests to cover. So we decided to dip online, and we're looking at some of the visual aspects of this news story. One of the best places for it is the UN mission and their Twitter account online. They're sharing pictures like these, trapped foreigners, they say, who fled to the UN compound in Unity State in South Sudan. Another picture is this one holding a peace meeting, and these are people who've been internally displaced. Now, of course, this conversation would not be complete without your voice, so we want to hear your questions, your comments, even your pictures. Just make sure you use the hashtag AJStream.
Joining us in the studio to be part of our conversation about South Sudan's current crisis, we have Cho Lam. And Cho is a member of the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, or SPLM. It's great to have you here in the stream, Cho.
Thank you. Great to be here.
We'll be hearing more from you in just a moment. We'll also be talking about South Sudan in just a moment as well. But here first is a look at some of the other stories we're following from around the world. Just a few months ago, South Sudan was celebrating 2 years of independence. Today, more than 1,000 are dead, nearly 200,000 displaced. Violence erupted in mid-December after months of ethnic tension and a power struggle between President Salva Kiir and the ousted Vice President Riek Machar. Kiir says that the violence followed a coup attempt, although Machar supporters deny that allegation. And now, after several delays, the two warring sides are discussing ceasefire details in Ethiopia. What began as a political conflict is now taking an ethnic dimension between the country's Dinka and Nuer tribes. So how can South Sudan recover from this violence? To help us discuss this from Juba, I'm joined by Ateni Awek Ateni. He is the press secretary for South Sudanese President Salva Kiir. Also in Juba, Mading Noor. He's a journalist and co-founder of the news website New Sudan Vision. And on Skype from Massachusetts, Eric Reeves, author of Compromising with Evil, an archival history of Greater Sudan. Gentlemen, it's great to have you all here in the stream. I'm going to start with a very, very simple question that I know is going to have quite a complex answer. Mading, what actually happened? We were talking 6 months ago about an anniversary, the second birthday of South Sudan, and now we're talking about potential civil war. What's been going on?
A lot of violence has gone on in the last few weeks. Over 1,000 South Sudanese have been killed. 2 major cities lay in ruins, and there is ongoing conflict. It all started as a political dispute within the ruling party. There was a great debate about the future of the party, about democratic transformation within the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, that is the ruling party in the country. And then on December 15th, on the night of December 15th, there was fighting within the presidential guards. There's a lot of dispute about whether it was a coup attempt, about whether it was a mutiny, and then it became a rebellion. So whatever it was, people have died, and the future of this country is in jeopardy.
So, Ateni, that's a journalist's take. What's your take on what happened? Is there anything there that you disagree with what Mading said about what happened?
Actually, what's happened is, I can just sum it up by saying, it's the work of a desperate man, because someone who has been vice president for 8 years has actually decided that he must, become the president because of the prophecy of one Nuer prophet, which says that a left-handed man would become a president. And what is amazing is that the prophet of Nuer, which is also a prophet of doom, did not prescribe as to how and what method, a left-handed man would become the president. So Dr. Riek Machar saw himself in this prophecy, and so with the President Kiir reign of only less than 3 years, the vice president, who has been vice president for 8 years, decided to be desperate, and he wanted to become president by all means. He wanted to take a shortcut. He doesn't want to wait for the 2015 general elections, where President Kiir's position would be put on test on election. If he was to actually be a Democrat, he would have waited for 2015 so that he can contest. If he defeated President Kiir, then President Kiir will have to leave power.
Okay.
But he decided to take a shortcut by trying to take power by force.
All right, so a grab of power is your take on what's happened. Malika, what are the communities talking about?
Well, I'm interested actually in getting Chol's take on this based on this Facebook exchange that we saw. Stuart on Facebook says, I'm sure when South Sudan became independent, this is precisely what people predicted would happen. Jessica writes back, actually, it was predictable, but it didn't have to be inevitable. So were the fault lines for this conflict already present?
Well, this is Eric. The fault lines were certainly there. I think we need to give Salva Kiir credit, first of all, for keeping South Sudan out of war with Sudan. And this has not been an easy task. In March and April of 2012, there was very, very serious fighting in the oil regions. There have been constant provocations, probing attacks by the Sudan Armed Forces of the North, area bombardments of various targets in South Sudan, including the Yida refugee camp. But what I'd really like to do is look forward. We've been looking back. How are we going to put the fire out? We have negotiations, but these negotiations seem to be going nowhere. There's incremental progress, but it seems just enough to keep the international community from throwing up its hands and walking away.
Can I just ask something? Because as we're covering this on our news coverage, negotiations only started today, so how can they be going nowhere?
Well, they were supposed to start last week.
It was, yes.
And we've seen delay after delay, and the excuses for the delays are increasingly weak. Added conditions for starting the talks or setting the agenda. What we really need is an immediate military stand down, not a fully negotiated ceasefire, but a cessation of offensive hostilities agreement. That's going to be very difficult given the scale of violence around Bor in particular, in Juba, in Ye, in Bentiu, in Malakal. But that's what has to happen. And it's going to take courage for both men to say that this is what we must do. I think each should make a gesture right off the bat. I think in the case of Salva Kiir, he should release the detainees and send them to the negotiations. I think in the case of Riek, he needs to agree to an immediate military stand down. He's been very coy when Salva Kiir on December 27th said he's ready for an unconditional ceasefire. Riek immediately imposed conditions. We need an immediate military stand down and good faith gestures by both sides, and then let the negotiations begin.
So I'm really interested in the way that Eric analysed the situation. But Chol, you were in Juba, you were in South Sudan literally just days ago. I'm just trying to work out what you think the conflict's about. I keep seeing you popping up on the news talking about this, but what do you genuinely feel the conflict's about?
Right. Well, I must first start by saying that I completely agree with Eric. He articulated the position very well. We could speak about what happened in Juba, and that's easy to do. We could blame each of the leaders, but that's not going to help tomorrow.
Right.
Tomorrow is a day where we need to make sure that every child is safe. We need to make sure that everybody's back from the camps. We need to make sure that there's no more fighting, and we need to avoid this from happening again. Now, I think, in my view, and particularly from what's happening in Addis is not going to come up with a very concrete results, and that is
Why?
due to the fact that what are they there to discuss? Ceasefire or a solution to the problem? In my view, to have a solution to the problem, you need to have as much dialogue as possible to the issue. And that is involving the detainees, like Eric said, involving leaders, religion leaders. You could involve elders, you could involve chiefs. This is a matter of a country, and which I believe that it needs a lot of dialogue and trying to get a confirmed solution. Because tomorrow you could put away Riek, but if you don't actually tackle the issue, you have another Riek coming out. You have somebody else from Equatoria. You have somebody else from Northern Bahazal.
Yeah, I hear someone jumping in. Go ahead. Who's that?
But this is not the first time for Dr. Riek to do this. He has done it in 1991, and he has done it again, and he will do it third time if there is no proper mechanism on how peace settlement can be reached.
I completely agree with you.
Chuan is talking about not blaming any leader. There should be a blame here because last time,
my brother.
When the SPLM, when the SPLM was sitting to pass its document, Riek Machar abstained himself the next day. And he started.
That's fine. We're talking. We're talking history. We're talking history. Now, before the show started, you labeled me as a rebel. We will not be able to solve the problem of the country without labeling each other, whether it's a rebel or not a rebel. This is not the point. The point is, how do you get the children that don't even know me, don't even know you, don't know Riek? But let me make a point.
Anybody who has taken arms, even for one day, is a rebel.
Yes, that's fine.
Anybody who has taken arms, and if he kills. Even if you kill a rabbit.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you. I agree. The point is, it's not about labeling people. It's rather, let's have a solution to the problem. And the solution is to make sure that this doesn't occur, or to stop it, to make sure that it doesn't escalate to where it is. Now, we could blame each other. We could blame each other all we want. But that's not the solution, my brother. You're my brother. I'm calling you my brother, and you're calling me a rebel. Look at the difference that we're approaching the problem.
Let me weigh in here.
Let's hear from Mading. Mading, go ahead.
Let me weigh in here.
Go ahead.
Let me weigh in here, and I wanted to take it back to a month back. There is blame, but the blame is on two sides. It's not only on one side. Here is why I say that. There was a great debate which was going on within the ruling party. The former Vice President, Riek Machar, had a credible argument, and he was talking about democratization of the Sudan People's Liberation Movement. The people of South Sudan were very receptive to that. They held a press conference where they lay out their issues and their disagreements with Salva Kiir. Then there was the meeting of the ruling party, and in that meeting, in the initial meeting, it was attended by Riek Machar and his group, and it went on fine. Then the second day, Riek Machar group boycotted it. Here was what happened. Salva Kiir,
but let us put
hold on. Let me finish my point. Let me finish my point. Salva Kiir, the chairman of the party, had the mechanical majority to pass the constitution and to do anything he wanted. They were 138, and then when they did the final tally, the group that was left with Salva Kiir were 128.
Okay, Mading, remember we have an international audience here, so make your point very quickly in one sentence so I can bring in the community, because they really still want to understand the situation.
My point was that Salva Kiir had the majority support within the ruling party, but he should have listened to the other side, because in a Western democracy, what he did would have been right. But in Africa, one person like Riek Machar can mobilize his tribe, and that's what happened.
All right.
The difference now is that Riek Machar has decided to go on the rebellion way, and that is where he loses any credibility.
Okay, let's hear from the community again.
Well, Femi, Mading mentioned listening to the other side, and there's many of our community members who say that hasn't happened because of ethnic tribal lines. Sengiri on Twitter says ethnic lines have always been a problem in South Sudan, but I will say that's gotten a lot of pushback from other members of our community. There's a video comment from Emmanuel Jal, who is a former child soldier, a humanitarian, and also an activist, and I'd like all of our guests to have a listen to this.
My name is Emmanuel Jal. And I just want to say something about my country, South Sudan. What actually happened in South Sudan, it's a political situation that has turned tribal. where the country has failed to transform into a democratic state. And for peace to be in a country, peace is when conflicts are managed in a mature manner, that violence is prevented. Peace is justice, equality, and freedom for all.
So Ateni, in that video comment you hear, he says that peace can only come when conflict is managed in a mature manner. It sounds like he's saying it was not managed that way this time.
In fact, peace is when the two parties are actually committed to peaceful negotiations. And the government, the position of the government and the position of President Salva Kiir has been that of forgiving. He has been actually forgiving those who have taken arms. Since 2005, he has been pardoning warlords, and those warlords even flooded the national army. What is supposed to be national army became comprising of members of certain ethnicities that has actually rebelled against the Sudan People Liberation Movement, the Sudan People Liberation Army, before the signing of the CPA. So President Kiir has been doing that. He has always been giving an olive branch, but on the other side is Riek Machar, who has been vice president for 8 years, who doesn't look, to Salva Kiir as a point of strength. That if Salva Kiir is actually forgiving, okay, he sees it as a point of weakness, and that's why, in any situation, that it has never happened that a vice president tell the president that you please end because I wanted to govern also. I wanted to become president. When in fact he should become president when the elections are actually in place. So we know in government that for peace to come, there has to be a genuine and peaceful settlement.
I hear this debate going backwards and forwards between our guests, and obviously you're hearing a little sliver of the conversation that's happening in South Sudan as well. Something that we haven't touched on yet, which is so critical, is the humanitarian crisis that this whole conflict has started off. So I'm on OCHA South Sudan's Twitter page here, and they have one of their latest reports, and it's just in this map you see so much. So the areas here where you see the man and the woman in red here, these are areas where we have refugees from South Sudan outside of the country. So we have them in Sudan, in Ethiopia, in Kenya, also in Uganda, in the country. Well, the blue areas here, these are areas that are internal displacement people's camps, so you may well think of them as refugee camps. These are at UN bases. The orange areas are areas of camps which are outside of the UN areas, and this is something that's going to be quite shocking for you. This blue here, that indicates all of the states affected by the violence. So this is pretty much most of South Sudan affected by some kind of violence or conflict. So Mading, I want to get a set idea from you about what is happening on the ground to everyday people. While these discussions go backwards and forwards, it's political, it's you to blame, it's ethnic. What about people down on the ground?
The destruction that has happened, the looting that has happened, the killing that has happened is enormous and unthinkable for a new nation. And as the talks go on among the politicians in Ethiopia, those who are not talking are the majority in this country. These are the tribes that have been torn apart by the violence. So this time around, people are saying, we don't want reconciliation without justice, like we have tried before. We want accountability for the crimes that have gone on, for the killings, and for the displacement. Who is going to be responsible? In 1991, the people of Bor witnessed a massacre where thousands of them died and they lost a lot of property. In 2014, they had cattle, they had property, all destroyed. So who is going to be responsible? And who is going to provide a Marshall Plan? So people want to move ahead, but this time must be different. We must not seek peace without justice. That is what the people are telling me.
If I could just pick up on the question of the humanitarian situation, I think the word we need to have in mind is urgent, urgent, urgent. Toby Lancer, the chief UN humanitarian officer in South Sudan, said there are over 200,000, this was several days ago, 200,000 people displaced, and that number could grow to 400,000 in a matter of a few more days. Now, with a crisis growing at that rate, We just can't afford to have conditions placed on a ceasefire. And here I must really fault Riek Machar for not agreeing to an immediate military stand down. What's happened is that a political dispute has become more and more inflected along ethnic lines. You can't really say it's political, you can't say it's ethnic. The boundaries between the military, the political, and the ethnic have been hopelessly blurred. And in that chaos lie the seeds for much, much greater destruction unless we bring this fighting under control. And we don't have a lot of time. We have days. If we see 500,000, 1 million people internally displaced, there will be no part of South Sudan that is spared.
Right.
Every place in South Sudan will suffer.
All right, Eric, I'm just going to squeeze in another viewpoint from our community. Gentlemen, just hold tight for a moment, because the conversation is not just amongst ourselves, it's amongst our online community as well.
Well, of course, connection there is a bit spotty, but we are hearing from people on the ground in South Sudan. On Twitter, one person writes in about gunshots still being heard now in some parts of Juba. We don't have real leaders who bring down this to an end. He goes on to say all local generators were ordered to be stopped so that people could hear which side of the city that there is fighting.
So I heard from Eric. Eric was like, the minute we started the conversation, Eric was like, okay, this is what we need to do. This is a solution. But Eric, you're sitting in Massachusetts in the United States of America. I need to go to Juba and Ateni, who's the press secretary of President Salva Kiir, and ask you, what is the president's plan? How do you get out of this crisis? Ateni?
Yes.
How do you get out of this crisis? What's the president's plan? Just briefly, just to wrap up this part of our conversation on this part of the show.
The president of the republic has made it abundantly clear that he doesn't want people to continue to die in this war. But does he have the all options? Because Riek Machar is not responding to the call of the president to end the violence. And if at all Riek Machar accept that South Sudan should not continue to bleed, then even now the war can stop, because the president has shown his readiness, to stop the bleeding. It's not the president that is aggressive.
All right, so I hear that, and I hear you say that all the way through our program, but I'm not hearing what the president's plan is. He needs to have a plan, regardless of what the conflict is. He's president of South Sudan. What's the plan?
Well, the plan is that the negotiators are in Addis Ababa now to negotiate peace. Somebody that has rebelled, against the government, and he started killing people. Only that the president is saying, this time around, those who have been inflicted, those who have actually impinged on other people's rights, and those who have killed people, should be brought to justice.
But that's not a plan.
Eventually, they have to be brought to justice.
Eric, you also read my thoughts.
Salva Kiir has to make a gesture that will put the onus on Riek to come to an immediate agreement on a military stand down. I would suggest the best such gesture would be the release of the detainees, but he has to make a gesture that puts the onus
let me
on
correct, Professor.
So I am just going to cut across all of our guests, because we have Eric, we have Mading, we have Ateni, and we have Cho. They all have things to say. You could hear them all there. And also our community, Malika, is scrolling through her screen like she's never been this busy before. But we have less than 30 seconds for this main show. So I'm taking all of those guests to stream.aljazeera.com. The conversation will continue. The conversation is very vibrant, as you can tell. There's a lot of energy in it, and we will go there. Do join us if you can. Stream.aljazeera.com. Let me tell you about what we'll be doing on the next program. A case of corruption, or perhaps an attempted coup, this time in Turkey. We'll look at the scandal that's threatening to take down Prime Minister Erdogan. Tweet us your comments on that story, and they too could be running along the bottom of the screen, like today. Stream.aljazeera.com is where we're heading to. We will see you online. Thanks for watching. Hello again, this is the online post show. Today we're discussing what's next for South Sudan. As you could hear, every one of our guests had something to say. The point where they all wanted to jump in was really, what is the plan? President Salva Kiir, what is the plan? And as Ateni was talking about what the president was going to do, Eric just piped up and said, well, that's not a plan. And then Mading jumped in as well. So Eric, let me go back to you, and then Mading, and then I know Chol had stuff to say. And in that mix, we'll also put the community. Eric, you start.
We need a larger context here. I'm not sure if I can articulate it fully, but we have to remember that there are serious reports of Ugandan troops moving into South Sudan. China has become involved. Al-Bashir visited Juba this morning, and there was only one subject in that conversation. How do we get the oil flowing to Khartoum again? The northern economy is in an absolute shambles. This brings tremendous pressure to bear on the regime in Khartoum to get that oil started. And I'm afraid that means by any means. Rightly, al-Bashir began with the government in Juba, but one possibility we cannot rule out, especially in light of memories of the 1997 Khartoum peace agreement signed by Riek Machar, is that unity state where the oil is Riek's home territory, and a deal could be made with the Sudan Armed Forces and Riek's forces. That would be a disaster all around, but so would Ugandan troops in South Sudan. We've got a lot of ways in which any plan could go astray.
Right. There's a lot of guesswork going on there right now, obviously. But Ding, what did you want to jump in to say?
I think the first and foremost, the talks are part of the solution. They are not the ultimate solution, because in the end, these politicians will strike some kind of a deal, and maybe it will be power sharing or whatever it becomes. They come back to Juba and they move on, and the people continue to struggle. That's why we say this time must be different. There must be justice. There must be accountability. For the government, people need services. They need infrastructure. They need hospitals. This is the unfinished business. And this is a debate that cannot be clouded by what has gone on in the violence that has gone on in the last few weeks. For the rebels and the rebellion, and if you are popular, then let's do it through the ballot box, because in 2015, there will be elections, and the people of South Sudan will get to choose. But the only caveat is that this time, people must be held accountable.
Well, if I can just pick up on what Mading just stated before we go to the community. I completely agree with Mading. I agree with Eric, and also with my brother Ateng in Juba. But the difference is, we're not giving any solutions to the problem. And this is where I would like to put in a few cents, if I may. The solution to the problem is stopping the escalation of the situation. We can smear, like how my brother Ting did. He smeared completely the former vice president, calling him a prophet of doom and so on and so forth. That's not the point. The point is, what do we do from here? We have an opportunity now. We have, also with the opportunity that we have misery. The misery is the children that are in the UN camps, the one in the bush, the people that have fled, some have drowned, others that are being killed. These are the victims. How do we save them? How do we make sure that this doesn't escalate? And that is through negotiation and dialogue. We have student of this. We have learned through the history that it's only through talks that we'll be able to come to a solution. The opportunity that we have now at the moment is Addis Ababa. Addis Ababa is a good point to start. But we, as far as we know, it started on Thursday. Friday went, Saturday and Sunday, and then again today. Why we're not able to stop or to get a talk going as people are being killed is because we're not having a complete, comprehensive solution to the problem. We need to release the detainees. This is not because I like the detainees or anything of sort. It's because these men have a lot of stake and have a lot of knowledge, and they could compromise. If you're building a country based on democracy, the fundamental principle about democracy is compromise, dialogue, and make sure that and patience. These are things that we need to make sure that we endure at this time.
What democracy when people are dying? Can you kill your way to a democracy?
Mading,
you
please,
I'll let you. A democracy.
This is not the point that I'm making. Don't try to feed this point that Ateng said that I'm defending the rebels. No, I'm trying to get a solution. You are angry, so am I. I'm not in my country. Let me just. Can I finish the point? The point is through the fight. All of this is because of democracy. Riek said that he's fighting because democracy. Selva is saying Riek has left. Let me just finish.
So, gentlemen, let me just interrupt 1 second.
The solution.
Joel, finish the sentence because you're never going to get to anything else.
The solution, my brothers, listen to me. And this is all my stake, your stake, is that we need to have a comprehensive dialogue on have a national reconciliation, ceasefire, release of the detainees, and make sure that this doesn't escalate to more killing.
All right, we hear you. Gentlemen, stand down for 1 second. Just hold tight for 1 second. Committee's going to come in, then we're going to come back to you. Malika.
Thanks, Fanny. I wanted to share just a personal story because I said we are hearing from people on the ground in South Sudan. This is actually from someone who's not in South Sudan, but George says a friend SMS'd him from Juba to tell me he is under the bed fearing stray bullets, and that was a tweet we got just a few minutes ago. Really share that human aspect of it. But Eric, I want to go to you with this next tweet. This is not the time to trade blames, this person said, and that's something we've heard among our panel here today. On Twitter, Amsterdamus says almost 1,000 lives have been lost already. This calls for negotiations between both parties. So I want to transition this back to the talks because you mentioned earlier some of the parties to the talks and whether or not they're there in good faith. I'd like your thoughts on some of the people who are involved in the negotiations.
Well, IGAD is providing the nominal auspices, diplomatic auspices for these talks, and Uganda is a member of IGAD, and Uganda has construed the 4-day deadline that IGAD issued 2 weeks ago as licensing their ability to move weapons into South Sudan. This is only going to throw fuel on the fire. There's no way that the rebels will accept, Riek Machar's forces and others will accept Ugandan assistance to Salva Kiir's army. You also have parties that have divided interests, like China. And above it all, and defining the context, is the desperate need of the Sudanese economy for the oil revenues. 2 weeks ago, there were bread lines. 3 weeks ago, there were bread lines. And there were bread lines in Khartoum because they don't have enough foreign exchange to buy the wheat, to mill the flour, to bake the bread. That is a formula in a country with soaring inflation, huge external debt, and almost no foreign exchange. That's a formula for uprisings of the sort we saw in late September, early October. And the next time
Eric, I'm sorry if I might. This is not about Sudan at this time. We should not discuss Sudan. I know the picture you're drawing, but this is about the children of South Sudan that are dying hungry, that might be killed tomorrow, based on the fact that the government of Sudan might ally with the government of South Sudan into making sure the security of oil. This is the problem. And as much as we could talk about this, we need to make sure that there's more dialogue, there's peace, and that is through dialogue and it's through negotiation. So this time that we have is a great. Please go on, Ateng. Please go on.
Yes, let me come in. Actually, when people talk about the solutions, people has also to visit the root cause. Because if you don't address the root cause of the problem, even if you talk about solution, you cannot get the solution. In 1990, what happened in 1991? Okay,
Ateni, you are going to have to convince me that going back to 1991 is critical to this conversation.
No, I wanted to tell you the history.
Yes,
I wanted to tell
I'm going to tell you that this is not a great place to do history of Sudan, South Sudan, unless you can do it in one sentence. And I know that's
but the same man is doing the same thing. If I was in place of I would even leave politics.
My brother, this is not a campaign. This is not a campaign.
Let him finish. I just want Ateni to understand. You cannot do an entire history right now.
People, and you want to seek, power sharing again in order for the next 5 years or 8 years to kill other people.
Listen, I will not agree to power sharing. I will not agree to power sharing. President Kiir is the legitimate president of South Sudan. I support him completely. But the problem is that how do we make sure that South Sudan gets to a peaceful dialogue, to a peaceful solution? I'm not here to come and campaign. Hold on. This is not, this is not a complete solution to the problem, my brother. The complete solution is to have a full dialogue, including people like religious leaders, chiefs that are their children that are fighting on behalf of other communities based on the fact that their brother and kinship are being killed, and because of the fact that they're getting rumors from Juba or what is facts or true or not. This is the problem, and it will escalate. Tomorrow you have somebody from Lakes that might say that my brother has been killed by Riek, so I'm going to join the fight. But listen, Manding, let me make this point because it's very important. The point is, without national dialogue, reconciliation, we'll always have fight.
You've made that point. We heard it very
But we're talking about history. This is not a smear campaign.
We're not talking about history because we do not have time to do that.
Reconciliation is when everybody is working to ensure that.
Go ahead, Ateni.
Yes, I said reconciliation is what anybody is working to ensure that this country doesn't continue to bleed, and the idea, the issue of people talking about the Dinka and Nuer fighting themselves, we in the government we have already said that this is not true, because what has happened is about the group of soldiers that has actually rebelled against the government, trying to take power by force, and it was quelled. And some of them actually decided to take a rebellion. So this is not about Dinka and Nuer.
See, Ateni, the reason the
Dinka
guests
are brothers and sisters.
All right, Ateni, see, the reason the guests are jumping all over you, and myself included, is because all the way through our conversation for the last 14 minutes, I have yet to hear, and I don't think they've heard or our online community have heard, you suggest a solution. I know you are very focused on how it happened, why it happened, who's to blame, but no one's heard a solution yet. So I think that's why people are jumping all over you, Mading included. Mading, I know you had something to add, so go ahead, briefly.
What I would like to say, this was not a tribal issue. It has been tribalized because tribalism is a mobilizing tool for politicians in Africa. In the end, this debate has never been about Salva Kiir or about Riek Machar or anyone else. It's about the people of South Sudan who will continue to suffer throughout this. And it's about our future because we have to now move on. And how do we move on? That is the question. Right. Because when all is said and done, we will share one country at the end. But with the animosity that has outgrown...
Mading, how do we move on, Mading? How do we move on?
Then the question is, we don't want these politicians. We want a more hopeful future where a new generation comes in and sees sense in everybody, whether it's from your tribe or from another tribe. We want a brighter future without these divisive politicians.
But they're going to be politics.
We can move on.
Wherever
we can move on.
Wherever you have power, they're going to be politics. The question is, how can politics in South Sudan be improved? Now, that's an ongoing process, and there are ways, I'm sure, in which Salva Kiir can be criticized, perhaps criticized severely, but that's a process. South Sudan came into being under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. They faced an immediate war of economic attrition from Sudan, and in some ways we're holding up too high a standard, I think, as to what could have been achieved in the time that South Sudan has been a nation.
All right, so gentlemen, when we started our online show, the pre-show, all that time ago, you all told me what was missing from our news coverage. We covered pretty much everything on your wish list apart from one thing. And Mading, you failed. You said that you wanted to bring some positivity to our conversation.
I think
you did not.
There is a lot of
this is your chance.
There is a lot of positivity. It has been categorized as a tribal war. And if it has been so, then my hope for the future is how many Nuers have risked their lives to defend their fellow Dinka, and vice versa. That is the hope of the new nation, and it's not being highlighted.
All right, and you just did. Our online community, our last comment comes from them, while Mading ignores the telephone in the background. Go ahead.
Well, I'll leave us with a little positivity as well. Agil has tweeted in, young people are the future and the majority. They belong to the hashtag #MyTribeIsSouthSudan generation, and that's a hashtag that was trending among young people not too long ago who want to break out of the ethnic barriers that they feel have been prescribed onto them. And she goes on to say, they have the skills and the solutions to help.
Gentlemen, I really appreciate your time today, helping us understand the conflict in South Sudan better, listening to the debate. Cholam, thank you so much. Ateni Wekateni, we appreciate your conversation and your contribution from Juba. Madin Noor, we appreciate you too, and also Eric Reeves as well. Thank you for being part of this stream show. What we will be doing on the next show? Well, a case of corruption or an attempted coup, but this time in Turkey. We'll look at the scandal that's threatening to take down Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Send us your comments on that, and you can do that really easily at #AJStream, and they could be running along the bottom of the stream in the next program. Until then, we'll see you online at stream.aljazeera.com. Thanks for watching.